So the incremental model uses that term that we just talked about, which is incremental. We're incrementing past something. So with the incremental model, what we do is we basically complete the software development process multiple times throughout the course of development. However, with each process, we have a certain goal in mind. So we have, for example, the goal to build the back end or build the front end or build a form out, build a page out. And we go ahead, we create the requirements, the design, the implementation, the testing, and then we deploy it into what our final product is going to be. So we basically go into the first increment. Once that's finished, we'll go into the second. And it doesn't have to be we don't have to finish this to get to the second. A lot of times we'll move through the steps, and then once we're past, for example, the implementation, we go into testing and deployment, we'll begin the next increment. We'll begin the next phase of development. And this allows us to sort of have this little bit of overlap here, which again allows us to keep working at an efficient pace. And throughout this process, we're slowly building towards the end product. These increments also allow us to show off final parts of the design. So if this, for example, was the front page and a couple of forms, we could send that off to the client and say, does this part of it look good? Again, this isn't a finished product. We can't have them test out the entire thing and give us feedback to change the whole thing. What we can do, though, is give them a little bit of feedback on the current parts and pieces we've built and see how exactly they like those parts and pieces. So we build the front page in a couple of forms and a couple of pages, and that's our first increment. Once that's done, we can send it to the client for feedback and then move into the next phase with any of those changes, or we could create a new phase about actually changing anything that the client had problems with. And with this, we have this idea of being able to sort of put these gates throughout the process where we can keep going, we can keep producing, but we can also keep getting feedback to see if the product and the project is going in the direction that we want it to be going. It adds a little bit of adaptation to the process. Remember, predictive and adaptive? This allows us to get a little bit farther over into that adaptive side, where we can actually move and adapt with what the client is thinking and with the way that the production is going. This also adds layers of those feedback, which helps us out as well. A negative side of this is, again, reworks. If we do need to do major reworks here, maybe we've already begun developing with this in mind up here, so we might have to change some of the future developments, change the requirements not only here, but here and here, which would change a whole bunch of processes later on as well. And we might have to go backwards and rebuild different things. Another thing is the cost. The cost to run a whole bunch of different increments is going to be a lot greater. Not only are we going to have this overhead of managing this thing, we're also going to have multiple teams to work on different increments, because the same team that's working on this increment to finish this one out might not be the same team that can work on this. Otherwise, we sort of go into this linear thing where we're just moving from one to the next to the next. And that can be a process. We can do an incremental process where we do just move from one to the next, but we lose a little bit of the benefit when we do that, because we lose a little bit of the speed and stuff we gain through this. But that is the incremental model. It's a great way of sort of packaging up different design processes. And what's neat about this is that in each one of these processes, we can actually use a whole different model. So this could be the incremental model, and we could use the waterfall for this model. We could use the V model down here, and we could use sashimi down here. It doesn't really matter because they're all little individual products. But the incremental model is important, and it's a very good building block for other models in the future.